Good evening. Welcome to Live United. Living United, an opportunity for the Monadnock region to really come together to see what we can do to support our citizens. And today I have the good fortune of joining me Phil Vaughn from New Hampshire Public Television, Kim Firth from the Endowment for Health, Dr. Barnes Droppa from Impact Monadnock. And it's a joy to have them here because today we're talking about children. And there's nothing more important than our children and raising them as a community. So welcome all of you, and thanks for joining us here in the Monadnock region, for those of you traveling. Phil, I'm going to actually start with you, I think. And people are probably wondering, why is New Hampshire Public Television sitting on a TV show down in the Monadnock region? And today we're talking about raising our children. And New Hampshire Public Television got involved with raising our children. And why did they get involved?
Well, it was Raising New Hampshire, and I mean, these are issues that are important for the people of New Hampshire, so they're issues that are important for us. And PBS National had an initiative recently. It was called The Raising of America. It was a series of programs about early childhood education. And when they offer series like that, we often have interest in producing localized versions of it. So same topic, same issues, but really focusing locally. And it had been something that we had caught our attention, and the Endowment, by chance, happened to contact us, and we started talking about partnering. They were, the Endowment was a content partner, and looking at stories that focused on the issues statewide. So that was really how the discussion began.
So, Kim, you've played a significant role in this happening here in the state. You both personally in your role at the Endowment, but the Endowment has prioritized this issue. And why have they prioritized it?
Well, as we think about a social determinants of health frame, early childhood is where it all begins. So there's very compelling research that demonstrates the importance of the earliest years and what happens with early brain development, and it is literally the foundation for everything that comes after. All future learning and behavior really begins in the earliest years. So if we want to take a population health perspective, it really all has to start with early childhood. So the Endowment for Health has made a multi-year, multi-million-dollar commitment to focus on strengthening our early child development system in New Hampshire.
And we're going to come back around to this, but I want to bring it down to a local level. And Marge, have you talk a little bit about Impact Monadnock and how this is, we have at a state level things happening. How's it translating from that population level statewide down to the Monadnock region?
Well, I would say one of the priorities of state organizations and philanthropic organizations like the Endowment is field building and capacity building at a grassroots level. And so the Monadnock region has always been wonderful about collaborating and partnering. But this issue, this single focus issue of early childhood, and in particular in our region on the 0 to 5 children and their families, became so compelling after some data emerged from a well-being assessment that was done some years ago as the root cause or the root way to address some of our significant issues in our region, that the desire to form an organization around this issue really came to the forefront. And that's how Impact Monadnock came into being, was a way to address our significant social issues of economic opportunity or lack thereof, educational attainment issues, and child welfare, realizing that if you look into prevention in the very early years and their families, that you've got a way to address all three of those primary issues for our region. So the organization came into being really around focusing on the early years as a way to delve into our significant societal issues. And we've partnered with Spark New Hampshire, which is the Governor's Advisory Council on Early Childhood. And through Spark, made some wonderful connections with the Endowment for Health and other organizations to try to bring this issue into a primary focus for our region and to raise public will to support it, and public awareness and public education. So what we're talking about today is part of this field building effort, this capacity enhancement in our region to rally the community around supporting investment in the early years.
Kim, I'm going to come back to you, and then Phil, I'll redirect a question to you after that. But at the state level, you know, we see this initiative going on where we're trying to build capacity across the state. The Endowment, the Charitable Foundation, numerous organizations, philanthropic, as well as other organizations, have really gotten involved in taking this on as an issue. I'm curious where you've seen the government get involved, where you've seen, so our politicians, where you have seen business, and some of the other groups who may not see a role in this for themselves.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've worked on a number of issues at the Endowment for Health, and I have to say that I've never seen the kind of momentum that I see around early childhood. So whether we're talking about the business community, for example, the Coalition for Business and Education has really a coalition of business leaders that have come together in the state, have really prioritized early childhood as one of the most important things that businesses can invest in, because it is about our workforce, it's about our future workforce. So businesses, the BIA also has, the Business and Industry Association has a priority area that is focused on the importance of early childhood. You mentioned a number of philanthropic organizations, and I think those philanthropic organizations are really beginning to work together in ways and collaborating in ways that I don't think we ever have before, and making those connections between the statewide work, Marge mentioned Spark New Hampshire, the Early Childhood Advisory Council, and local efforts like Impact Monadncok that are really happening across the state, many of which supported by the local United Ways in those regions. So I think that it's exciting to see sort of a grassroots momentum. And from more of a policymaker perspective, I thought it was very exciting to see the governor talk in her State of the State address about the importance of early childhood, and the presidential candidates, which was really surprising that because we have so much support in local communities, and this is New Hampshire, we have the opportunity to meet all of the presidential candidates. We have this incredible opportunity to really educate them about the importance of the early years and ask them questions about what they would do if they were president of the United States. So we've literally seen that happen as well.
It seems like, Phil, this is really more for you, that media has played a significant role in this. When I think of the Raising of America and that whole filming that was done that you mentioned, and I would recommend to the audience that if you get a chance that you go online and watch that. I believe it's available for free watching through streaming online up until March 15th of this year. So really worth watching, but then we really took it to the next level here. And so media really got involved and so critical to that messaging piece. So you have an amazing website that has been put up right now, and you've done a series of film clips on that. Can you talk with our audience a little bit about what you're doing and why media is just, you're such a great messenger for this?
Well, it's important because it connects people. And what we look for when we partner with the Endowment is looking for personal stories that deal with a variety of issues. And we weren't intending to focus on problems, but looking at solutions and what people are doing. And we thought it was important that those stories are told because it provides information and opportunity for others to see what's happening in various communities around the state in a progressive way and share ideas. So the importance of media is really not as advocates, but as messengers, and the idea of bringing people together. The broadcast element was just a part of it, and what we encouraged in the Endowment and others have taken the program and taken it into communities, screened it, and then had follow-up discussions. And that's really the value of it, bringing people together to talk about issues. So that's what we try to do with many of our projects.
And that's one of the really wonderful pieces to this, and part of the reason you're all here is we are having a local screening here in the Monadnock region. So Marge, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, we're really excited about this. So one of the benefits about the Monadnock region having a presence at the table at state organization discussions is the fact that we get to hear what other initiatives around the state are doing. And the Endowment has helped to put together, along with Spark New Hampshire, a group called Community of Practice, which is a group of early childhood regional initiative coordinators and project managers getting together on a monthly basis to talk about challenges that we're facing and opportunities. And several of us said, you know, we would love to show Raising New Hampshire and accompany it with a true community discussion. So the Monadnock region is putting a screening of this on, accompanied by a panel, which I'd love to tell the audience about. It's a week from Wednesday, so it's Wednesday, February 17th. And it's at Keene Middle School, and that was a deliberate choice. We want school-age families and parents and children to attend. So it's from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock in the evening at Keene Middle School in a beautiful auditorium which has plenty of space. We're going to show the documentary, Raising New Hampshire, and then we'll follow it with a great panel discussion of a variety of people from across many sectors in our community. It's free, it's open to everybody. There'll be interpreters available at this event as well. So we're really making it accessible to all. And if you'd like, I can tell you who's on the panel.
That would be great.
Okay. So I have to use my glasses for this. So our very own Senator Molly Kelly is going to be opening the event. And you may know, and our region certainly knows, that Senator Kelly is very involved in children issues, particularly around hunger. So she will be providing welcoming remarks and opening the event. And then after the documentary, our panelists are Jose Montero. He's the Vice President of Population Health at Cheshire Medical Center. Jackie Cowell, Executive Director of Early Learning in New Hampshire, who, by the way, has a very prominent piece in the documentary, Phil, and she's amazing. And then we have Detective Bob Collinsworth of the Keene Police Department. And we have him on because law enforcement has become a very strong voice for connecting to early childhood investment. And Detective Collinsworth is very actively involved in Impact Monadnock's work. He's on our strategic planning steering committee. So law enforcement is definitely a sector that we wanted. David Beauchamp, he's the assistant superintendent from SAU 47, which is the Jaffrey Ringe School District. And we wanted him because not only is he seeing the challenges that are emerging with a lack of investment in early childhood, but he also has opportunities to explore successes that he's seen among families who attend the Jaffrey Ringe School District. And he's also a school psychologist, and he's also in charge of the special education. So he's really got a diverse background from which he can speak. And then we have Karen Dunnigan. She's a parent with 2 children, and she also teaches in the Fall Mountain School District, but she's also a foster mom. And so she has some amazing stories to tell about the early years and how we can help those who are experiencing significant challenges. And finally, we have Brittany LaFleur. We asked her because she's a Keene State College student, and she's also a future teacher. So she's going to bring her hopes for investing in our young children and why she wanted to become involved as a young person herself. So I think we have a wonderfully cross-sector panel. And I want to also add that we're having an audience engagement session. So we'll have microphones down in the audience for people to come up and ask questions, share their thoughts. So it's very much an interactive evening. So we hope you will all come.
You know, it's interesting. I've been in community work for over 25 years, and so often we hear about events, and we say, oh, you know, that sounds interesting. Maybe I'll go because it sounds interesting. But the why. Why is it so important for this particular event? And I think, Phil, in particular, the Raising New Hampshire and the whole video captures a piece of that. And I don't want to give away the video, but I would love for the two of you to share a little bit about the why. Why is this message so important? And I know one of the things that immediately struck me in reviewing the videos was we're ranked number 26. And, you know, 75% of our young people don't even become eligible for military service. They're not ready for the workforce. There's just so much data. And I don't think that's what's going to attract people. So what is the why? Why is this so important? Why was it important for public television? Why for the endowment?
Why for public television? It's because I mean, I can put it on a personal level and say, I believe that we all have a responsibility for our citizens. That's what I think the definition of being a patriot is, caring for your fellow citizens. And part of that caring is understanding. And in telling these stories, we were careful in that we didn't want to really focus on all the challenges, and what we're hoping to do is allow the viewers to get to know the people at a level to help break stereotypes that people face challenges for a variety of reasons. It's not necessarily because they're lazy or they're uneducated, that they're not trying. It's because they encountered circumstances that lead to the challenges that they're living with. And those challenges can be overcome. And sometimes it's something very simple, like when the home visiting nurse, and was it Colebrook? No. Claremont, sorry. Went to visit a young mother. And it was just simple information about how to hold the baby, how to rock her. And the mother had, am I doing it right? You know, it was all questions that everyone has that can help, I guess, help them be better parents. And so in telling those stories, we thought it was important because it provides information and helps spark. It provides a spark for people to think differently and sort of reach out and provide an understanding.
So from my perspective, I feel that the program Raising New Hampshire does a nice job of telling the story about how our young children and families are doing in New Hampshire. As you say, it has some startling data, but also focus on some really hopeful solutions, evidence-based home visiting, high-quality early learning, and supports to so that we ensure that every child has strong social-emotional development as part of their overall health, an aspect of health that I think we forget about. So I think the program does a really nice job of highlighting both those challenges and the solutions. And the why, as we talk to our community partners like Marge, people said repeatedly, whether they were a primary care provider or a early learning teacher in a preschool, people don't understand about the importance of the earliest years. And when we asked what could the endowment do, they said help raise awareness about the importance of the earliest years, because if people understood how critical those earliest years are, we as a community would really come together around families and realize that's where our greatest investments lie, in the earliest years. So I think that the documentary, the program, brings in a group of people who we might not be able to have that conversation with, the power of media. And it starts a conversation in a local community, but I think we wouldn't be maximizing the impact of the program if we let it stop there. And I think that's where Impact Monadnock and other community-based efforts really come in, because it's an incredible opportunity to use the power of this film to really create a conversation in the community. Some solutions are somewhat out of the control of a local community to change by themselves, but others are not. And we could actually be doing things today to help improve the lives of young children and families in our communities.
It was really part of what I loved about Raising New Hampshire, I have to tell you, because as a parent, and I'm a parent of a 20-year-old now, but as a parent, I was thinking back, and I was thinking, we intuitively know what we need to do sometimes with our children. Not everyone, because we certainly have trauma that children experience, but we know that. And why can't we carry it over into other aspects of our lives, our workforce, our careers, everything that we do in our lives, that we seem to all of a sudden forget that you're a parent. You're a parent no matter where you are. And you're raising children, and you're not just raising your own children, you're raising families out there because of your colleagues. Marge has sons, I feel like you do, Phil, that we have a responsibility to all of them. And even if we're not a parent, we still have a responsibility. They're our future workforce. They're the kids we'll be teaching someday. They're the people we'll be living next door to. So I loved Raising New Hampshire because I did think that it really sort of captured that feeling of their solutions out there, and that we're all part of that solution. So I really encourage people to be at this event on Wednesday at the Keene Middle School, because it'll be an opportunity for all of us to contribute to that discussion. I am curious about where you see things going with this, Phil. Where does Raising New Hampshire take us? It raises the bar a little bit in terms of our responsibility, our discussions that go on out there. What's next?
Well, I think it just evolves. I think it continues. It's the beginning point of discussions. And I think from past experience with other projects, it can lead to public policy changes. And I think it will continue to allow people to come together and to share ideas about how we move forward with some of these issues. And again, just providing an understanding of what some people are experiencing, and how we can together talk about solutions. But I think it sort of gets the ball rolling in terms of community engagement and outreach. There's a lot of people who are isolated and feel isolated. Mm-hmm. I think this gives them that opportunity to come forward and to discuss publicly some of their concerns.
And the interesting thing about that, as I was watching both, I watched the Raising America and the Raising New Hampshire, and as I was watching them, I was thinking, wow, even when I had my daughter, the family medical leave, I never really thought a whole lot about it until I was watching these videos. And I remember that I worked like crazy while I was pregnant to save up time so that I could take a 3-month leave and have some pay coming in those first 3 months after birth. And I was thinking, I was watching the video, and I think you had a mom in the Raising New Hampshire who was bringing her daughter into childcare and didn't have that option. She had to go right back to work quickly to be able to support her family. And then Marge and others through this work have been sharing, what's the cost of that? What's the cost to us in the future for that child, and what they can then be contributing, and how successful they are in life potentially. So all those things become so important, and we forget, we don't think of, I was fortunate maybe that I could take it, but that would have been unpaid leave if I hadn't worked so hard. Mm-hmm. and saved up all my sick time for a year.
Well, one thing I think that's very important, and to speak to your point, Phil, and actually you too, Kim, is that you don't have to be a parent to be at this event. And one of the things that we've tried to do with the Impact Monadnock work is to really make it cross-sector, cross-collaborative. So, you've talked about the future workforce needs, and we have formed a business advocacy group called Business Ambassadors of Impact Monadnock to align with the strategies that are coming out of our strategic plan, because as a community we recognize that this is much more than a parent-child issue, but that it's a community well-being issue across all these primary social issues that we're experiencing in the region. I've had people, approach me to say, what can we do, whose children have long left, the family home and are out, earning money and in their own careers, because they recognize that it's a cost to the taxpayer's pocket if we don't invest early, either through the criminal justice system or substance misuse, remediation, whatever that might be. So I urge people to think much more outside of the parent-child box, if you like, and to think of this as the well-being of the Monadnock region from cradle to grave. Grandparents. In our region, as you know, Kelly, through United Way, we have many, many grandparents who are raising the birth of 5 children, some of whom have told us they're using their Social Security checks to raise that child. We've had inquiries about training programs for grandparents to help them raise these very young children. I really want the audience to understand that comes, on the 17th, that they have an opportunity to speak very holistically about this issue, and that we need to solve it as a region, and not just as a parent-child issue. I think you would agree with that, Kim.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would add, from a business perspective, I've heard a number of business leaders talk about, yes, it is a long-term vision to be thinking about the future workforce when you're investing in early childhood, but many business leaders are actually starting to think about it from the perspective of the mom or the parent or the caregiver who comes to work, and it allows them to be more present and productive in their jobs when they know that their child is being well cared for in a high quality early learning setting, as opposed to a neighbor or other informal care. So it has immediate return on investment for an employer as well. In addition to thinking long-term about the skills that we need for a 21st century workforce. And Kelly, I'd love to pick up on a theme that you brought up, that our public policies really have not kept pace with the changing demographics of America and of New Hampshire. That New Hampshire has a very high percentage of families where both parents are in the workforce. All caregivers are in the workforce, and so we have an educational system that, for all intents and purposes in New Hampshire begins in first grade, because we don't even fund full-day kindergarten. So the structures of our early childhood system just have not kept pace with the changing 21st century workforce.
And it was interesting to actually watch the documentaries, because they do talk about the growth in terms of corporate America and some of these other issues, education, and that we're not keeping pace in all these areas. And then what happens is you have to have both family members working. I think we're beginning to see a shift to some degree on the part of some local businesses, certainly. I'm guessing that you met some across the state that are beginning to make change. And then we see larger organizations, groups like Netflix, that have just changed their policy to say that, for the first year, you can take whatever time you need during that first year, and it's paid. That's amazing policy. And when we think about our children, and what's become very interesting is they're finding that employees aren't abusing it. They're using it as they need to use it to be a good parent.
Absolutely.
In their child's life.
I mean, I grew up in Canada for most of my adult life, and we had children who were born in Canada, and I'm not promoting Canada, but they have a very progressive family leave policy. My wife was able to take a year off at 80% salary, and my children had opportunities to go to pre-kindergarten, and at 4 years old, my son was learning a second language in pre-kindergarten, and that's when the linguistic part of the brain is so active, and he was nearly fluent by first grade in a second language. And I think, part of our mission, if I can use that word, in telling these stories, is not to change people's minds, but to just challenge them to start thinking differently about what we do in our communities.
I love that you said that, because I thought that was captured in the films. When they talked about the family medical leave, it was a battle. It was vetoed by the president twice as an act in the United States, because they said, we can't do this. You had corporate America saying, we cannot have families taking 3 months off from work, even though it was unpaid.
So how does it happen in other countries?
Exactly.
And people survive. I mean, corporations survive.
Yeah, and the documentary talks about that. And I think that's why the discussion becomes so important, and the challenge that these kinds of documentaries can put out there. Because when we think about this, people they're thinking, we can't do this, How can Netflix be giving people a year off from work to take care of their children, to take them to a doctor's appointment?
Well, that's one of the issues that has come up before this new advocacy group of business ambassadors for our region, one of whom is the COO, Katie Schwerin of Badger, who just won an award for being one of the best businesses to work for in New Hampshire, one of 18 actually. They have 100% retention. Now think about the cost savings of not having to hire and train a new employee. And that's at all levels. So from management, so from top down, they have perfect retention. That's because they have a Babies at Work program where no matter what stage your baby's at, you can bring them to work. There's child care on site made available. They grow all of their food. They give free lunch in the cafeteria from gardens that surround the corporate headquarters there. They have flexible scheduling so that a parent, if they want to go to a baseball game or a softball game, they can go and not feel guilty about it. But I think most importantly, and like you, Phil, I'm from a country, the UK, where there is a big social safety net for families. For everything from childcare to if you're laid off, there's places for you to be taken care of. So both of my sisters took a year off after they had their children with full pay, and their jobs were waiting for them when they got back. Plus they had home visiting all year round. Can you imagine?
I can.
It's incredible. It's almost worth moving to the UK for your first year of life with your child's life. But so as Katie of Badger has said, these things take time. You don't have to do everything at once, and it can be something as small as things which cause the parents most stress in our community, which we have found through interviewing parents in the Monadnock region, are they don't know what they're entitled to. And there's such gray areas in the policies, even in the employee, the new employee handbook, it doesn't really say. And you get stressed about it because should I ask? I'm just new, or what am I entitled to? And nobody seems to be clear, and that includes the employer as well. So I think just helping to make your employee handbook clear on its policies would be a small thing that businesses could do that would make a big difference.
Absolutely.
So.
It's my previous position, they changed one of the policies, and they are as I was working there, and it used to say around sick time, but parents were always nervous about, do I take sick time when my child is sick? and not really knowing, is that going to be okay? Am I going to be perceived, I take 3 days off in a row because my child can't go to school. The school has policies. This has become a huge issue for the schools because they can't allow a child in there who has a fever. You're not supposed to send them to school. And the school nurses send them home. They changed the policy in my workplace halfway through the time I was working there to state that you could actually use your sick time when your child was sick. But why would we even have to put that in writing? That becomes the discussion in question, is how can we not all feel a responsibility for our children and their futures, and support people and support their employees or whoever they may be, and really moving their children forward into healthy lives. So it becomes an incredible opportunity for discussion. Marge, can you remind us again when that event is?
Yes, it's on Wednesday, February 17th. It's from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Doors will open at 5:30, so we urge you to get there. And one thing I'd like to add, it's at the Keene Middle School, is that we will have what we call action forums on every seat. So people who come can be involved in the discussion, they can ask questions, but they can also sign up to get involved. So a lot of people, ask us, well, what can we do? So these action forums are an opportunity for you to check a couple boxes, put your names and your emails on there, and we will follow up with you. That's a promise, that's a guarantee. And we will help you get involved. So in addition to forming a business group, we are currently in the process of forming a citizens advocacy group to be aligned with Impact Monadnock and the strategic plan. So would you like to become part of that? You can be. Just come and sign that form Wednesday, February 17th.
And that ties right back into our Give, Volunteer, and Advocate. It's really an opportunity to be available and involved on a local level. I do want to also, Kim, if people wanted to be involved at a more state level, we talked about policy and that it's just not there all the time. If people really wanted to be an advocate, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, great question. So we've talked some about Spark New Hampshire, the Early Childhood Advisory Council, and recently the Policy Committee came up with a framework for action, and it's being released just this week, actually Thursday, to the legislature. So you can find out more information about that by going on their website, which is sparknewhampshire.org. Sparknewhampshire.org?
I think it's .com.
.com.
Yeah.
Sparknewhampshire.com. It's there on their website, and it's the sort of frame for the policy priorities is very holistic and looks at the policy priorities from the perspective of health, family support, and early learning, and proposes a number of very specific, actionable recommendations under each of those areas, which is exciting.
So we have the Spark New Hampshire website available to folks, but we also have the New Hampshire Public Television has a series of documentaries that people can watch. Can you tell people how to access the information that you're providing?
The easiest way is nhptv.org, and then you can navigate through. It's clear on our website where to go to, and it's a site that has resources from around the state. And if people are interested in having their own screenings, we can provide a DVD to them and probably give some basic instructions on some guidance on how to have their own screenings. But,
We also collectively produced a discussion guide for the Raising New Hampshire program, and that's available on New Hampshire Public Television's website as well. And it includes, you mentioned about advocacy and how do people get involved. It actually lists in the discussion guide organizations that do advocacy work. So folks can access that through the discussion guide. I believe it's on the last page of the discussion guide, where it includes contact information for each of those organizations as well.
Super. Now, I know on the website for New Hampshire Public Television, you also have some national resources. And Marge, maybe you can speak to these, or Kim, which are Vroom, and I think it was Text Talk, is it?
Text for Babies.
Text for Babies. which just has such an odd ring to it. You know, this is the changing world that we
Yes.
live in that you were talking about, Kim. You know, we don't oftentimes think, wow, how am I raising my child? And I'm going to get text messages about how to raise my child. But it's actually, it fits so with the world we're living in right now, technology-wise, and people are busy. So getting those little text messages, and the kind of comical piece to that is when you talk to a new parent, they're all wondering, what am I supposed to do? I think you capture this in the documentary. You know, how do I hold the baby? And am I holding them right? You know, am I burping them right? All those questions that a new parent has. So, Marge, what are some of the resources people can tap into locally? These are available through the state level as well.
Well, Impact Monadnock has a website, impactmonadnock.org, and a lot of these items that you just mentioned, we post regularly about these things on our website, but also on our Facebook page, so you can like us at Impact Monadnock as well. But you mentioned the Vroom initiative, and I'm just in awe of that work. And it actually always makes me a little teary-eyed, to be honest, when I watch that video. But if you just, Google Vroom, V-R-O-O-M, there's a great video that comes up. But basically it speaks to the fact that we as parents are much more powerful than we know. And we have tremendous resources within ourselves. And Vroom is all about empowerment, I would say. And Kim, you know, I'd love you to expand on it. But part of the video, there's a box that the parent opens, and I hate to spoil the surprise, but I'm going to. But you open the box thinking there'll be all these, videos and toys that are educational. But actually, there's just a mirror, and it's you looking back at you, understanding that within us, as not just as parents, but as neighbors, friends, guardians, grandparents, we have the power to influence the well-being of our entire community through investing in our youngest children, and we know what to do. Just need a little help sometimes, and it's good to ask for help, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Vroom was developed by the Bezos Family Foundation, and it's free. So for new parents out there, as Marge said, it can be downloaded. They're apps for your phone. And so every day you get a daily message that helps you. The motto is making every moment a brain-building moment. And so it gives you concrete tips in the busy world that we live in of ways that you can help build your young child's brain. And I have a 6-year-old, and I have to say I mean he's getting a little old now for some of those tips, but it's just really wonderful. And so again, it's free, and we live in this technology age now, and so it's just a wonderful way to reach new parents with supportive messages.
You know, so much of that is we do have control over. You're right, Marge, and it's as simple as listening and the words that we share. And there's one of the kind of neat projects I've seen going on around the country is grocery stores really embracing this and labeling things with colorful colors, words, so that a parent's talking to their child as they're going through a grocery store. And we know the importance of words. We know the importance in terms of brain development. The documentaries certainly cover that in a very nice, simple way for all of us to understand the importance of making those connections early in a child's life. But there's other things that people can do that are just simple things like that. That's where business comes in. You know, imagine if every grocery store across New Hampshire was doing that. If every business had a small garden that was part of feeding families, it would be an amazing simple little things that we can do that'll make a difference to the future of our country.
And when I think about how stressful trips to the grocery store can be, how can I get through the checkout line without my child leaping out of the shopping cart, or wrecking
Pulling
the belt?
things off the shelves.
I mean, that's a much better alternative, isn't it, to actually be educating your child as well as educating yourself, and having a little bit of fun with it too. Phil, I mean, you've been a parent, you know how stressful some of these shopping trips can be.
Yeah, and working on this project and editing the stories, things were said, and it sort of made me think about, when our children were young, how the first child, everything was unknown, and how many mistakes we probably made, but as we, as the years go on and you reflect back, how you do things differently. Just, the one clip where, I don't know who it was saying, just look in their eyes and goo-goo gaga, just goo-goo gagging with your children, make that connection, that important connection.
Absolutely, the serve and return relationship.
Yes. Yeah, I thought
between the
that was
parent
one
and
of
the
the
child.
most interesting pieces was the serve and return, because you really don't have to do much more than smile and make a noise.
Right. In fact, in the national documentary, Raising America, there was that experiment that was done, and it was a mother looking at her child, and the child was looking for a reaction, and the researchers told the mother, don't change your expression. Don't smile, don't connect, and quickly the child was fearful or in trauma somewhere because they were crying. And then the mother said, and then everything was fine, but it was just that facial response that the child was looking for. It was a great
And
demonstration.
the research has shown that it literally is wiring children's brains when you go goo and they say ga, and you do this dance together. And that's really what the tools, Text for Baby and Vroom, are really meant to do, to really encourage that back and forth between the parent and the child. It's really wonderful.
And this really points to what you were saying, Marge, that you don't have to be a parent to do that. As we're going down the street and we see children on the street, we can smile at them. We can say hello to them. There's lots of things we can do. It's interesting to me because I see people often do that with animals. They'll stop, they'll pet a dog, that may be leashed on. They acknowledge them. We don't always acknowledge the children we're passing by. And perhaps that's something simple that we can do. That's the kind of discussion we can have at this. What are some of those things we can do as community members out there?
Well, and I think it's very important to acknowledge that this initiative that we're working on isn't just a children's initiative. It's a children and families initiative. And we've been very cognizant about stressing that investment in our community means investing in the adult just as much as the child. So we recognize the neuroscience and the importance of early brain development, between birth to 5, but we also recognize the importance of, maternal screening, for example, and interventions while the parent, even before the child enters the world. So there's a lot to that. The other thing I would urge is that yes, I still have children at home, but, thankfully they're teenagers, or maybe not so thankfully. But there's still work that can be done beyond the birth to 5 age range. And I think that's very important to stress that, our teenagers need love and affection and intervention just as much as our birth to 5, if not more sometimes, as do our young adults. Many, as we know, are coming back to live with us yet again. So there's this life cycle that happens. So, smiling at a teenager is just as important as smiling at a young baby, maybe more so. I don't know, Paul. What do you think, Phil?
Just that understanding of as they grow older and they go through different brain developments, that as a parent, we understand that they may seem rebellious, but it's part of the brain development stage. And they want to be independent, but they still want you there as a guiding force. So that understanding just helps everyone.
I agree. And I do want to, before we come to the end of the show here, I wanted to share, this has been something that Early Learning New Hampshire has really shared with us through some of the conferences, but Mind in the Making. So if parents are looking for what are those essential skills, I think we all run around looking for the answers, especially when you're a parent. But as anyone, a neighbor, a friend to someone who has children, regardless of their age, what are some of those things that we can do? And they talk about 7 essential life skills here, and they're focused in self-control, perspective, communication, making connections, critical thinking, taking on challenges, and engaged learning or self-directed learning. My gosh, those sound frightening. But they're pretty simple. And so how do we simplify that for people? And I think it's done very well, by the way, through the documentary on how we simplify some of this.
Well, I think the book gives some wonderful examples. Just as a parent, I read the book and it was just a joy. I mean, it's a sort of how-to guide for how you develop those skills. And also, the author, Ellen Galinsky, was one of the creators of Room. So a lot of those tips and techniques are really baked into the Room tools. So that's really wonderful as well.
Well, I think one message that I got from the book was that, we tend to focus on our children's academic development. It's all about testing, did you get an A? What's your GPA in college? Being someone who used to teach in the college environment, one thing that I found preparing my seniors to go out and find a job was that employers don't necessarily look at the GPA. They want to know socially, can you get along with others in a team work setting? Can you work independently? Are you autonomous? Do you have a sense of responsibility? Do you know how to organize yourself and your thoughts? Do you know how to write well? Can you critically analyze a problem and come up with a solution that's global in nature? So a lot of these executive functions are developed in the early years and need to be encouraged throughout the lifespan. So they're not just focusing on test results, but we're focusing on the well-rounded person. And I think that should happen in the early years, but it also as adults, we need to continue to strive to be well-rounded and holistic in our learning and the way we adapt to an ever-changing world.
I just read the studies on what employers are looking for now in our workforce. The number 1 and 2 things are that a young person has done an internship and that they've traveled. And believe it or not, the GPA or how they've done academically is 3rd on the list. And it really speaks to what you're talking about, Marge, that they're looking for people that can make those social connections, have critical thoughts, be organized, all these executive functionings.
Well, I always found that the best students that I ever taught were not the ones who did the best academically. They were better in those other executive function skills, to be honest with you. You can be bright as all out, but if you don't know how to organize your studying time and self-manage, then you're quickly going to start to struggle. I continuously stress this to our families that, it's not about reading and writing is important, don't get me wrong, but it's also, can you get along with others as a young child? Can you dress yourself? Do you know what different foods are? Can you recognize them? Do you know what's healthy to eat? Do you know how much exercise your child should be having 6 to 7 days a week? By the way, it's most days of the week for at least an hour. So those types of things are as important as doing well with your books.
And when you mentioned travel, it's interesting. I don't think it necessarily has to be abroad.
Right.
But I filmed a story down at a charter school in Roxbury, in a community that's challenged in many ways. And this charter school is for 7th and 8th graders, and they make sure that the students who generally don't get outside their community are taken to the financial district in Boston to see what that's like. They take them to a ski resort in New Hampshire just to have them exposed to that environment, because they believe that once they leave high school and they go on to college, that they'll be meeting people who come from different parts of the country and the world, and they want them to feel comfortable being with those people rather than self-isolating. So it's interesting that exposure to different cultures and different people.
It is, and I encourage people to really direct themselves to New Hampshire Public Television, because you're doing some incredible work that can help us understand not only what the issue is, but what the opportunity is. And we oftentimes look at it and we say that's too big a problem to solve, and it's really not, because there's a lot of simple things we can be doing. I want to thank you all for joining me. I'd like to ask if you have any last thoughts that you want to share with our audience here in the Monadnock region.
I would just encourage, as Marge has said, folks to turn out to the screening. I think it's an amazing opportunity for the local community to come together to talk about this important issue.
The same, whether you agree with what you hear in the program or not, it gives you an opportunity to ask questions and challenge people's ideas.
Be part of the solution.
Right.
There you go.
Absolutely. I think we should also mention that the Endowment website has a ton of resources on it as well. Impact Monadnock has a ton of resources, but one thing I'm hoping is that people will come with a question that they want our panelists to answer. So it very much an interactive evening, again, free and open to all, and there's going to be commitment forms there to sign up and get involved.
So audience, I want to thank you for joining us. I want to remind you that this event is on the 17th, correct? 6 to 8 p.m. at Keene Middle School. It is free. It's open to the public. We invite anyone and everyone to join that discussion about raising our children. Not raising a child, but all of our children. And so we invite you to join that. We have a wealth of information available across the state, as you can see, through New Hampshire Public Television, through the Endowment for Health, through Impact Monadnock locally, and you can always dial and call the United Way for more information, whether it's about this event or how to tap into connecting with some of these other services that are available. Again, I want to thank you for joining us, and I want to remind you, please remember to give, to volunteer, and to advocate. Live united.